Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I am your host, Ray Harkins, with you as always. This time, it's episode number 29, and I have Jono. I don't know how to say his last name appropriately. Diener, whatever. But he's more commonly known as Jono, who is the drummer for the band the Swellers. More on him in a minute. Propertyofzach.com. I know you're probably getting annoyed by hearing that, but you need to go to their website. We produce this show in conjunction with them, and they're a great site. They've got so much content up there. I think they do something like, 20, 30 posts a day on news, in-depth articles on, the music industry as a whole. They've been doing a series on vinyl pressing and why that sometimes takes a long time if you pre-order a record, and the intricacies behind that. So they just have a lot of great content that anybody who is interested in music will probably find something to relate on there. So check it out, propertyofzach.com. We couldn't do that without him and them and the site. Anyways, review the show on iTunes. We've been getting some cool reviews, and I appreciate that. So keep them coming. You can either take 2 seconds and give it a star rating, or you can take 2 minutes and write a little review, and I read them, and I appreciate them. So yeah, do that. And let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, visit the website, 100wordsorless.com. You'll be able to find some content in between the weekly episodes, just other recommendations of stuff that I've stumbled across, and what friends have exposed me to, and all that good stuff that we like to trade from music and movies and what have you. Yes. So as you've probably been noticing lately, I've been getting a lot of other sort of random guests, like people that don't particularly play in bands. And I'm going to be continuing to do that. And you need to subscribe to this show. I personally vouch and think that regardless of if you know this person or not, and actually a review that the show has on iTunes, a person mentions that they don't know 75% of the guests that are on here, but they're able to relate to them in some way, shape, or form just because of either common experiences, and that's what I essentially want to provide to everybody. We all have this uniquely shared experience because we are into something that, is not this sort of typical mainstream culture. And because of that, I think that we all obviously seek each other out. We like to have those people that are either into the same stuff that we are or slightly different, and therefore can expose us to a different side of things or a different world. And that's exactly what I want to encapsulate in this podcast. And that's why I do have people that, run clothing companies, and I'm going to have some people that, are involved in the art world coming up on the show. And so again, the common theme is the fact that they will be involved in independent DIY culture in some way, shape, or form. So yes, trust me, follow along, listen to all the shows. I promise you probably will get something out of it. And if you don't, then email me and be like, Ray, that was a terrible idea. Don't have that type of person on in the future. Because I do like to have that feedback. So yeah, and you can find the email on the website. So I've also, before we talk about the guest, I've also been going to a lot of weddings recently, which I guess it's not only that time of the year, but as your friends get older, they get married. And so I've had the chance to go to 2 weddings recently. One of them was a guy I played in a band with, Martin Diaz, and his lovely wife, Sierra now. I actually had the privilege of being in their wedding party. And I was actually really excited to participate in this. And I know a lot of people have mixed opinions on weddings. Typically speaking, they are fun, but then there's obviously some drama that can sometimes pop up when you have so many random people from all different friends and family facets of the wedded couple's lives. So that always sometimes, causes friction, but their wedding was awesome. And it just got me thinking where it's like, I personally felt really good after the wedding and fun and a newfound. I wouldn't say that I've lost the respect of my marriage, obviously, but I've been married for over 7 years now, and sometimes when stuff becomes a routine and you maybe take for granted the people you have closest to you, it's always nice to kind of put it in context where it's like you see two people getting just getting married, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember my wedding or my experience with that, and it just kind of puts it into perspective and gives you a context for like, hey, what I have, this shared history that I have with this person, this significant other, it's important. And, this isn't something to be taken lightly because, my wife is essentially my best friend and the person who knows the most about me. And that's something that, I think we just in the busyness of our lives sometimes forget. So it was nice to be able to kind of have that perspective. Yeah, so that was kind of what's been going through my mind this past week. Anyways, Jono, the drummer of the Swellers. The Swellers have been around for 10 plus years. They are a punk rock band. Sometimes people would call them pop punk because they put out a few records on Fueled by Ramen, which we will talk about in the interview. But I personally had never met him prior. I was aware of his existence. I personally am a fan of the Swellers and have been watching what they've done over the past 10 plus years as a band. So this is the first time I've ever been able to speak to anybody in the band. And we immediately connected and had a really cool conversation. This one, we didn't talk a lot of specifics, but more, a chat about our perspectives, how they've maybe changed over time, and sort of, music culture in general and how that's changed since we've personally got into it. And then also his, as a drummer, his perspective of playing in a band, and then, kind of growing older with it. Because, I mean, anytime you plan to do anything for 10 years, you start to have a different perspective of maybe you did than when, your band existed for 2 or 3 years. So I think I hit him at a really interesting part in not only his own personal life, but in the band's life as well. So I caught up with him while he was on tour. He's actually on a rooftop of some random hotel in Vegas. So, yeah, I appreciate him taking the time out of his tour schedule to chat with us. So here you go. Hope you enjoy. Most people are just like, oh, dude, Vegas is a hellhole.
Oh, you actually dig it? I know a lot of people, it's like 50-50. Some love it and some are like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Get out,
Yeah. Like, I mean, I just like it just obviously because, wherever you're born, you feel, that's your home. And so,
yeah, exactly.
And I still have family out there. And so but obviously it's like Vegas is so fucking weird because it has, the Vegas that everybody knows as far as the tourist strip part. But then it's like, there's this whole undiscovered side of Vegas, like, the real downtown and all that type of stuff. But
yeah. I have like a bunch of friends, like promoters and stuff here. So I kind of like try and get that whole side of it from them.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, you gotta have perspective because otherwise, but I mean, obviously you being in a band gives you a whole different perspective on cities as you go through them.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, this square mile is great. Everything else sucks. Yeah. That's all I did.
Dude, that's what, like, because I toured from like 97 till about 2006, 2007. And it was,
oh, that's great.
Yeah, like I played in this band called Taken. I sang for them.
Oh, cool.
And so it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, I've been able to see obviously all these cities like, just like you have, but then, yeah, you just know like 10 blocks in the area.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm trying to just go on my weird own adventures and just like wander around and like have like no destination, but then you find the coolest stuff. Dude. Or you go to a really scary area.
No. Yeah, totally. I love doing that too. Like that's towards the last few years of me touring, that's exactly what I did, where it's like, get to a venue and it's like the guys that I played with, a lot of them weren't, they didn't care. They just were like, all right, we'll just chill at the venue. And I'm like, no, I got to see stuff, man.
Yeah, I'm the same exact way, man.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you carving some time out on tour to do this. Usually I like to start things off with just kind of, the simplest thing, like, where you were born and raised and, brothers and sisters and all that type of stuff.
When I was, where are you starting right now?
We're recording, my friend.
Hi, awesome. Here we go. Here comes the saga. Uh, so I was born in Baldwin, Maryland, or wait, where was I born? No, I was born in like Barrington, Illinois. I didn't even know that until I had to fill out my passport, which is kind of sad.
Wow.
Pretty much my whole story as a child is my dad worked in the steel industry. So pretty much ever since I was born, I think we've lived in like 7 different places, but
Right.
it was like the most awkward, crucial development stages as like a social youth in school. So it'd be like I was born in Illinois, and then we moved to Maryland, and then by the time I think I was getting to like preschool or something, where I started finally making friends, then we moved to Illinois, like Orland Park, Illinois. And then I was like, okay, well, at least I'll make friends here. And then we moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I was in what grade? That was first grade.
Okay.
So right when I made my friends finally in kindergarten, then I moved again. And then I was like, whatever, awkward kid, not knowing what's going on. And then by the time 7th grade hit, then we moved to the Flint, Michigan area in Fenton, Michigan. So it's like every crucial, oh, I just made enough friends. Finally, like, this will be easy. And then someone just slaps me in the face and it starts all over again.
Dude, that's brilliant. That's it's funny because that experience that you're talking about is exactly like my mother. She had that same experience because my grandfather was in like the construction business, and he would like he worked for the government a lot, where it's like
Oh, okay.
they needed to build homes for a new military base or whatever. So it's like that same. It's funny because it's like obviously you're younger than my mother, but people still have that same
I hope
experience.
so.
Yeah. Yeah, but people still have that same experience where it's like, oh, cool, I finally like get in a rhythm and feel comfortable, and then yo, you got to move, pull up stakes.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like a weird metaphor for my life, too. It's like the second things get comfortable, it just crumbles around you. But it's a learning experience, so
Right.
that's the positive side, right?
You could look at it from the perspective or that age old cliche, like, hey, it builds character, and you're like, yo, I got enough character. Like, can I stop
Yeah,
moving?
I am the most character of anyone now.
That's funny. Okay, so your dad worked. I mean, like he just worked in the plants, like manufacturing
I,
steel, and
he was like one of like the white collar dudes. Like
oh,
this is the funny part. So when we let people know our band is from Flint, Michigan,
mhm.
people always assume that like my dad was like gridiron GM dude. Like he was the one that would put the wheels on the Hummer when they were done, or like whatever. You know what I mean? But
Right,
it's like pretty like we came from a good upbringing. Like we obviously I think we were pretty spoiled when we started because our parents got us like instruments. It's just me and Nick, my brother.
right.
We're the only siblings. And you know, there like the weird misconception is, being from the area we are, there's like the stigma of, oh well, like we're a hardworking blue collar band, but my parents, they worked their ass off when they started. Like my mom, she actually was born and raised in Poland and moved when she was like 13 or 14 to the States.
Oh
And
wow.
so she lived in Chicago. My dad lived in like Toledo-ish, Michigan, or sorry, Temperance, Michigan, which is pretty much Toledo, Ohio. And then I don't know how they ended up meeting, something about going to Chicago. But my
Mhm.
dad was a teacher, and he had this like, he taught like only inner city stuff, and like it kind of just blew. But that's what his passion was.
Mhm.
Then my mom actually worked at, I think it was like some kind of like pressing plant or something. But apparently she was making way more money than my dad was at the time, especially back in the day.
Right.
And then, and this was kind of the cool example I kind of used for like our band too. And especially with a lot of my friends in college, my dad went to school to be a teacher, like a history teacher. And he did that for a while. And then one day his childhood friend was like, do you want to work at the steel company with me? I'll hook it up. My dad was like, I mean, I guess it's more money, sure. He's been doing that for like, 25, 30 years now.
Dude.
So like all my friends that are so worried about going to school, they get, they'll either use their parents' money or loans or their own, spend like $20,000, get a degree they're not really certain of, and then just through networking, regardless, they get, the job they want.
Yeah.
So like, I just think it's a kind of a hilarious concept.
No, it's super funny because there's always that. I mean, I think especially with like our generation. I mean, because I'm actually I turn 32 next week, and I imagine you're probably around that same age, where
I'm 24, but I'm not gonna make you feel old.
that's fine. No, for some reason I thought you were late 20s, but I'm just taking a stab in the dark. Uh,
When I feel great about myself, like
yeah, you're welcome.
I'm
You're
so
welcome.
mature.
You are. You're so you carry yourself so well. But I think, I mean, obviously, even though there's a few years between us, like technically we're kind of still part of the same generation, but especially like
Yeah,
same experiences where you look at the idea and the concept of like, what you're talking about with your dad working one profession, for a majority of his life. And it's like, I think that, I mean, I read some statistic where it's just like, by the age of like 35 or something, people of our generation will have had like, 4 or 5 different jobs. And it's like,
yeah,
that didn't really exist back then. And then, but now just because the world is so much more, I guess, connected, and like you said, the whole networking aspect that, you just end up falling into things that you might not have ever planned for or got a degree for or whatever.
yeah. I guess that's the interesting part of life, and so many people are so scared of that, and that's like where I thrive. Like I love like not knowing, and I love chaos because you could actually shape it to make something cool and proactive in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas everyone else is like, my life isn't planned for me. I hate this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's it. I mean, obviously, like you said, you thrive on it and you've been able to identify that. But then it's like, you put someone else in your shoes and they would be like, oh my God, I have no idea. Like, I need to have my next 10 years, like, sort of, laid out for me in order to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So I think like kind of our whole story as a band too is so similar to that. Like, not to cut you off or anything. I just kind of sparked another idea.
Yeah.
But we had so many like road bumps as a band to where any logical person would have ended it by now.
Right. It's funny that you totally are going off on a tangent, but I was 100% going to ask you a question like that. So continue, my friend.
Oh, okay, perfect. There you go. This is why we're going to be friends.
Yes.
But yeah, like a lot of stuff, I guess like pretty much a quick rundown was, we started as a 3-piece just for fun in our basement. One dude wanted to go to college. We got 2 new guys, became a 4-piece. So we started playing like in the area, then we started playing, it started getting bigger and bigger, whatever. And I guess the whole chaos aspect comes to it where first when we started, and a lot of people don't know this is actually pretty interesting. My dad's childhood friend who got him said steel job I talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He actually was a songwriter and he wrote songs for like Hank Williams Jr. and
Oh, wow.
like some other southern rock artists. And he was like, I want to help you guys. And this is keep in mind, this is when I'm 14 years old. So I have no idea what the hell's going on.
Right.
And so he's like, I want to help you guys, get big. And like in our heads, we're like, well, I mean, we could be like a punk rock Hanson. That'd be cool. Because our whole thing was our gimmick is being young. And that's the only way things are going to work out for us. So we're like, all right, this is badass. So, him and this one dude, like, they didn't really do anything with our songs, but they paid for studio time in Nashville for us.
Uh-huh.
So, we flew down there, we recorded these songs. They ended up pretty much sounding like garbage, but hey, we were the cool kids who recorded in Nashville,
Yeah, dude,
and the whole time.
That's a huge experience. I mean, you're 14. It's like you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, of course I'll do that.
Yeah, so all the kids at school are like, "Whoa, you're cool," or "Oh, that's you suck." And so the I guess the chaos aspect introduces itself into our band when he starts talking about he has friends at I think it's Sony BMG, and he's like, "I'm gonna push them to you." Push you to them, and I'm going to make this a huge deal, and you're going to get signed, and blah, blah, blah. So like filling our heads with this. And this is when I'm like 14 and 15 years old.
Right.
And it was like screwing with me so bad. So I'm like, all right, well, my gauge of success now is if we sign to this label. All right, cool. So, we were busting our ass off locally, doing all this stuff. And then we kind of realized, like, wait, this guy doesn't really, have our best interest in mind because he has like this, country southern rock mentality and like the big business and yada, yada, yada.
Uh-huh.
Never hear back from the label, and we're like, oh, this is weird, whatever. So then over time, fast forward a few years, we're like super cool, wannabe punk dudes, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And we befriended a band called A Wilhelm Scream, and we've been buddies with those dudes for a really long time now. But they sent our stuff to Nitro Records, and I'm sure you're familiar. You're from Southern California.
Yep.
And that was like the pinnacle of punk rock for us. That was like our Fat Records because, we weren't cool enough to be on Stat Records.
Right.
But
Right. That's
we were like
that's
getting,
what you grew up with, right?
yeah, exactly. So, you know, we were looking at all these bands like Crime and Stereo, No Trigger, Wilhelm Scream, much the same. All of our peer bands were all getting signed to Nitro.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, and I was 17 at the time. So I'm like, all right, well, you know, my new goal is before I'm 18, then I'm going to sign to a big label. That's it. That's, you know, I've set my standards to this now. I'm like, all right, cool. So we're talking to them for like 8 months. We got to meet like Dexter Holland. We were like all freaking out and stuff.
Right.
And then last minute, we get a call. Yo, we're having some financial problems. We can't sign you guys anymore. So we're building this stuff up back home and like in the music world, and like, yeah, we're for sure signing the Nitro. Like, we have the contract. And then out of nowhere, they're like, yo, we're kind of going under.
Right.
So they dropped all of their bands, never signed us, and then like Wilhelm Scream was the only band that stayed on for one record.
Uh-huh.
And it was just it was the exact same thing I was talking about before, where it's like, oh, we finally made it. Just kidding. You
Right.
know?
Dude, that's so funny because, yeah, I remember that era because during that time I was working at an independent record store, and it was like literally down the street from Nitro. So some of the guys would, a guy that used to work there, his name was Mitch.
Yeah, Mitch is awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And he would come in and we would kind of, you know, shoot the crap or whatever. And I totally remember where it was like, you know, I could hear the tone of his voice where it was just like, oh yeah, things aren't going very well. You know, we just need to focus elsewhere. And yeah, it's just funny that you were kind of all caught up in that bad timing of it.
Yeah, well, and no one knows that. That's the funny part, because like you don't publicly say,
no,
well, you know, our claim to fame is we almost signed to Nitro when I was 17.
Right, right. Well, because I mean, dude, at that time, I mean, that was like you said, that was obviously something that, you know, it's a touchstone for you. You were like, God, we have to. That'd be amazing if we got this. And I think it's funny that you in your own mind were creating these goals based on your age, where it's like, I need to do this by this age. That's kind of funny that
Oh yeah,
your head was working in that perspective.
it is kind of sad too. Like, I think, you know, that kind of goes back to the whole like societal norm thing, where it's like, for me, I didn't have you go to college, you get a good job, you get married, you have kids. Like mine was like, all right, if I do this by this age, I could establish normalcy for myself,
Mm-hmm.
you know, instead of being a normal person, just having fun and not thinking about it. But that's, you know, that's how I'm wired.
Right.
But then, you know, after that, you know, we did stuff on this small record label called Search and Rescue. That band Chiodos, like their first EP was on it, just like a local Michigan label. And that was another thing where, you know, I actually remember like our band has this history of always starting to get somewhere and then nothing ever happened. And it, not necessarily, like, this sounds, you know, terrible to say,
No,
but like
okay.
we were never a band that had any hype. We never had a music scene to be a part of. Like in Michigan, and this isn't even exaggerating, we were one of the only punk rock bands in Michigan for like 5 years.
Oh yeah.
And so we would just jump on like weird like metalcore shows or whatever. And, you know, it was before it was cool. So, you know, we had like only a few people at shows or whatever. And so we were just so burnt out because all of our friends' bands, like we were on a tour. It was Crime and Stereo, Polar Bear Club, and Broadway Calls.
Mm-hmm.
Broadway Calls signed to Side 1. Polar Bear Club is signed to Bridge 9. And Crime and Stereo just signed to Bridge 9.
Mm.
We were the only band that had nothing. And we were like, seriously? Like, what are we doing wrong? This sucks, you know?
Yeah.
And we actually got an email from Fuel by Ramen the day I went for a walk when we were like talking about like the future of our band. I'm like, oh, maybe this is it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Like
that,
the timing of it came true.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, that's kind of the continuation of the story where it's always like, you don't think things are working out, and then they do, and then you fast forward again.
Yeah, no,
and it's like,
for sure.
and that's kind of like the hot commodity right now, like the whole like us leaving FBR thing. And, you know, obviously I won't get into excruciating detail with it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's like, over time, you know, the first record, things were awesome. We were like, holy crap, our friends back home are freaking out. We're like, dude, I saw you on like MTVU, and like all this cool stuff's going on. And then, you know, as the musical climate continually changed, it was just another, like, you know, just a big brick wall for us again, where the next record was coming out, and they had, you know, all this other stuff going on with the label, all this crazy crap going on. And we're like, all right, well, here's our record. And then it's like, well, that should come out like a month earlier. We're like, really?
Really? Are you sure?
Okay, sure. And then, like, you know, all these little things started happening. And pretty much what ended up happening was we paid the most money we've ever done for a record. We got to record with Bill Stevenson from Descendants at Blasting Room, which is, like, you know, again, one of my, like, bucket list kind of things where I'm like, all right, well, I've always wanted to do this. I did it. Cool. Yeah. We put so much into the record. And then I think, like, and the biggest thing that came out of said record that we put everything into was we got, like, 1 million YouTube plays. Mm-hmm. So in theory, we would be really rich. But
right.
In theoretical internet dollars. But it's one of those things where it's like, I think it was 3 or 4 months into the record, and we were just like, this isn't working anymore. Like, our mentality was just so changed because things went well, and then when things didn't go well, we finally had the balls to do something about it. Uh-huh. And it's not even necessarily the label's fault. It's just the combination of everything, you know?
Right.
So, like, we started realizing, we're like, what? We're like a punk band. What are we doing, you know? And even the tours we were getting that year, like, all of that was kind of, like, for example, Soundwave Revolution. It was, like, the second Soundwave Australian tour a year. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for whoever's listening and isn't familiar, that's, like, they get, like, 100 huge bands, all put them together, and they tour Australia together, and it's crazy. So Soundwave Revolution, that was supposed to be Van Halen, Alice Cooper, Hole, Danzig, and then, like, you know, go down the scale, and it's like All Time Low, Panic! The Disco, us, and some other bands. And what ended up happening with that was Van Halen dropped off. All the other big bands are like, okay, we're going to drop off too. So the biggest band was All Time Low compared to Van Halen.
Right.
So
I remember when that all fell apart, and it was totally one of those things because everyone speaks so highly of Soundwave in regards to, yo, this is amazing because it's like, you know, we can become friends with a band like Baroness, who we would never play with, we would never have any reason, and so but I just remember when that all fell apart.
Yeah, and that's what was killing us because we were like that was after a tour where, like, I think pretty much what kept happening for us, every time we get on a tour, it would be like the lesser version of the band's tour, whether, like, they were somehow on the decline or, like, some crazy thing happened. Like, one of them was the AP tour with 4 Year Strong, and I just remember that tour, every single night, there was 3 or 4 other huge tours in town that day, and all of them were affected. So it's like our morale of, like, we have this new record. Oh, you guys don't know it's out yet? Oh. And then people go up to shows like, why isn't this sold out? And, like, having to awkwardly explain that to people, you know what I mean? It just sucks.
Yeah. Well, no, it's funny. It's funny, not to interrupt your train of thought, but like,
oh, no, go ahead.
I do completely. I mean, that's what the impact that the Swellers have had on my life in regards to just kind of watching you guys progress. It's such an interesting thing because I do really think that you hit on a very important point in regards to, because your band was never really part of a community. It's like I look at, like, you know, obviously other bands that grow up in certain areas of the country, and obviously they gravitate towards one another, where it's just like, you know, I mean, you look at Title Fight, Balance and Composure. It's like every scene is able to kind of, whether or not they sound alike, they start to play shows together. And like you said, you're just playing, you know, you're stuck up in Michigan, which, I mean, realistically, like, there's not much that comes from that area, like, at all. Like you said.
Like, and we already used our connection, you know, like Suicide Machines and Mustard Plug. That was for us.
Right.
That was years ago.
And totally. And so it's like, because you weren't a part of that, you know, whatever, you didn't have a culture that you grew up with besides, you know, punk rock. And that's obviously like a national thing. You guys, you know, it seemed like to me, you guys always just made a logical step where you were just like, well, I mean, I guess this is what we should do. Like, I guess we should sign to Fueled by Ramen because they are a large label, and, like, that's cool. It doesn't make a total sense for us because we aren't that band, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's
like, why not at this point? You know what I mean?
Totally. And, like, every move you guys have made, I mean, it's been cool to watch because it's like, you know, I mean, certain things work, certain things don't, like you said. But yeah, I think it all stems back from the fact that you guys were kind of, you know, isolated in your area.
Yeah. And another thing too is, like, it is kind of like I'll preface this with saying I'm not jealous by any means. I'm, like, proud as hell of all the bands, but it does kind of suck, like, being a band, like, you know, busting our ass doing all this stuff and then seeing, like, the No Sleep records and, like, the Run for Cover community,
right,
and those just thriving like crazy.
Yeah.
And at its pinnacle is when we just signed a Fuel by Ramen.
Right.
So it's like we were never really able to jump in that whole thing. Like, you know, we toured with the bands, but literally because of a label name, it, you know, not saying Fuel by Ramen, but I'm saying like, you know, Run for Cover and those bands,
Yep.
they had what we would have had if we signed a Nitro. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they finally became part of something. And, you know, obviously they're already friends because they're from mostly the same area. But with us, they're just like in Michigan, like I was saying, we're the only punk band forever. When we started touring, we booked our own tours for like years. And then finally, like some people started catching wind of us and like, you know, kind of taking us under their wing. But, you know, where it was like, for a lot of bands, it'd be like, let's say, you know, like Wonder Years and Fireworks and all those kind of guys, you know, doing tours with each other and like Balance Composure, all that. With us, it's like, we started getting like, you know, like Less Than Shake and like Wilhelm Scream and like bands that meant something to us, but they were completely irrelevant to this other scene of music. So it took us so long to even try and like integrate ourselves with that. But at the same time, it's like, that's who we are, you know? Like,
right.
Every time we kind of like overthink the whole thing, we're like, who cares? Like, we're where we are because we chose what we wanted to do, and that's how things work.
Yeah.
So now go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and it's funny because like you were talking about earlier in regards to sort of the stereotypes of the, you know, the Michigan / you know, Flint, Michigan area where it's like, yeah, you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. We manufacture our own stuff. And it's like, you know, that you guys have had to do that just based out of the, you know, sheer necessity. Like you've had no choice but to do that because you didn't have those things to kind of work from. So yeah. It's kind of funny how that all sort of parallels one another without obviously, you know, really being something that's intentional.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess a good, well, a transition from that too would be like, well, two different things. The first one would be kind of going back to the whole like deciding to leave Fuel by Ramen thing. It's literally taking us full circle to where, you know, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, which is insane.
That's ridiculous. Like when I saw that you guys were doing that, and it's just like it totally blows my mind because people have such a misconception of what it is like to play in a band. It's like, I mean, when I say people, I mean, you know, people that just, you know, go to shows and, you know, don't really experience the music industry in any way, shape, or form. And it's like, to be able to do what you guys have done, like as far as just merely exist and put out records, that's like hard.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, keeping your sanity is the hardest part.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's like we had, you know, the 10-year anniversary, and it was like weird coincidental timing. You know, we got off the label, and we were like, okay, well, can we just do things how we used to, like just not care and record in our house? And we did. And it's super weird. You know, like you'll hear like Foo Fighters like, yeah, man, like we wanted to record in our garage, so we hired like, you know, a guy to set up like $10 million worth of studio equipment, and then we did it in my garage.
Right.
And it's like, you know, no one of my favorite bands. I'm not like dissing them or anything, but it's just like, come on, dude. And then you hear the other side where
those are different. I was just gonna say those are completely different contexts.
Yeah. And then you'll hear like, you know, Radiohead and Nine Inch Nails like, you know what? Bands don't need record labels. That's irrelevant. Blah blah blah. And I'm like, you guys sold millions of records.
Yes.
Like we've sold dozens.
Right.
You know? It's like, come on. So I like, if any record labels are listening to this, we sold more than dozens.
Right. No, we sold probably maybe like 10% of what Radiohead did on their last record.
Exactly. Yeah, because we're punk as hell.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, you hear all that kind of stuff, and it's like cool, you know, like for being like big role models, I guess. But it's like the realistic senses. I'm like, this is kind of what we're trying to push on this record. It's like we're a band who most people don't know of, and we have a feeling if they did hear us, they'd probably like us. But we've never had the opportunity or the privilege of getting the real push to get to all the people that we want to hear us. So we just figured, you know what? Like, the best way to find what you're looking for is stop searching. Let's just do that. And that's what we did. We recorded 5 songs, and it literally talked about all the crap we went through in the year. Like, I went through a breakup. Our band got off the label. All this stuff happened, and it's like we wrote these really angry songs, well, at least lyrically, you know? And it's kind of like we naturally went back to our roots and combined all the stuff over the years. And, like, by not trying and not having the pressure of trying to get on the radio or doing this, we made what, people are telling us are some of the best songs we've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like, oh, so when we're just venting naturally and not even caring, that's when, it's almost annoying, but at the same time, it's like really relieving, because it's like, why we don't need to care anymore, like in the best way possible. You know what I mean?
Right.
So now it's like we're putting out like we just announced like we started a thing called Snowbird Songs, which is our it's our quote unquote label. But literally all it is just a logo we're putting on things we release ourselves. And I actually got it tattooed like months ago when I had this whole like we got off the tour. Once we got off the label, I got out of my relationship. All this crazy stuff happened,
Right.
and I got it tattooed on me way ahead of everything, because I was just like, this is like the logo of just starting to be carefree again,
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what we're trying to show people, where it's like you don't have to stress out or kill yourself over stuff. Like, this tour alone that we're on right now, it's like my mentality went from the most bitter, pissed off person, and then fast forwarding to now where it's like I am so stoked on life. And I think it's just I had to deal with all the crap to get to this point. But it's like I'm so stoked I found this at a young age, because I was on the quick track of just being like a jaded, 40-year-old in a 24-year-old's body.
Yeah. Dude,
and a lot of people are like that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because like you did mention, you're obviously you're 24, you're younger, and it's like I look at myself, and it's like, I'm turning 32, and the idea of like whatever, I have a wife, I have a kid, like there's all this adult shit that I'm doing, but it's like above all, I really don't feel jaded. I still get excited about hearing new music, and it's like I would be so bummed if that. No, I wouldn't be bummed. I would be devastated if I if you held that, like exactly what you're saying, where if you held that sort of jaded perspective, because all it is, I mean, being jaded, that's all on you. Like there's no one else that decides when you are jaded, like period. And so it's like some people just they blame it on, oh, the scene's changed and the band sucked or whatever, and it's just like, well, you're just not paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to the whole like adapt or die philosophy. It's like if you want to keep your sanity, you don't just stick in your weird little bubble. It's like you go out and see the world, and whether the world is like the physical geographical locations or it's actual just your local shows.
Yeah.
And it's like bands are doing well again. It sucks that CDs aren't selling. It sucks that MTV is irrelevant, and that the radio is you have to pay a ton of money to get on.
Right.
Like that's the realistic side of things. But it's like you look at a different perspective where I'm trying to think of a good example. Not a Surf. It's one of my favorite bands of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 90s, the singer was 27 when their first record came out, and I'm not even there yet. So I thought that was pretty cool. But that song, but that song Popular comes out, and it's this huge radio mainstream success, yada, yada, yada. People consider it a one-hit wonder. But what people didn't realize was after the whole label situation ended for them, they went to Barstook Records, which is, like a bigger indie label. But they kind of like stayed under the radar in the right way to where they could still play for, hundreds to, 1,000 or a few thousand people. But they've been doing it, and the singer's like 43 now.
Right.
And it's like they've been doing it this whole time, and they haven't given up, and they seem happy with life. And it's one of those cool things where it's like you can still exist as a band, but it depends on what your definition of success is. And a lot of people, instead of setting their standards so high, don't even set them in the first place. And that's what I'm trying to do in my head, And like I was telling you, like, oh, I got to do this before I'm 18. I got to do this before I'm 21. And it's like,
right.
No, it's like my definition of success is being sustainable and being happy with what you're doing.
Right.
And I'm close, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's like, and then I guess another thing a lot of people don't realize is like when you're like, we've been touring for 6 years straight, and the biggest break we've had was this summer, which is like 3 months off with a week of Canadian touring in between, for like 10 days or something. So in theory, it wasn't even 3 months off. But a lot of people have the privilege of having a job before they start touring, and then they're allowed to leave and come back and yada, yada, yada. So like our bass player is an electrician. Ryan has been working at Jet's Pizza for 11 years in Michigan.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's like he isn't even a manager because he tours like so much. So
right.
He can't do that, So it's like, and then Nick has his own studio. And then the one thing that people don't realize is if you don't have this weird independent DIY trait or have pre-existing relationship with the company, then you're in my shoes, where like, I do so much for our band, and I'm like Mr. Social media guy and yada yada yada.
Right.
But when it comes down to it, what the hell am I going to do when I'm home?
Yeah.
Like we did enough tour. I think we did like 3 months of touring, and I'm like, hell yeah, I paid my summer's worth of rent when I'm home. I'm set. And I totally forgot about living expenses. So I'm like, oh, I have to get groceries and stuff too? Crap. So, all my friends would be going out doing this cool stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna hang out here. They're like, why? Like, come on, rock star. I'm like, oh, you have no idea.
Yeah, you're like, no, I'm just gonna go ahead and write on my Tumblr because I literally don't have any money, and fortunately, I've been able to pay my rent and my utilities, so that's pretty much all I can afford right now.
Yeah, and it's like, like I actually was on food stamps for a little bit, but I had to like show all of our band receipts, and I couldn't get on it anymore. But it's like that's another thing where it's like that actually benefits people like us. It's like we're actually doing stuff and like promoting. Like we're big advocates for Flint, Michigan. Like like I was saying, it has this negative stigma, but to us, that's home. And just like you were saying, Las Vegas is your home.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, people are like, oh, that place sucks, blah blah blah. But it's like, that's why our band started, because we played there for the first time. And like, our venue just reopened, like all this cool stuff's going on. And the way I look at it is like, we're actually promoting growth of our city by traveling and spreading the word and spreading the stories,
Dude,
so it's like, I feel okay if I was getting government money for it.
Dude, yeah. Well, you have to look at it from the perspective too, where it's like every single major metropolitan city, country, whatever you'd like to call it, has arts grants. It's like, obviously you see bands in Canada that are being able to be subsidized, like, make videos, make records, like do these things.
Yeah, getting all the grants and stuff.
Totally. And it's just like, in America, it's just, obviously it's a completely different system and that doesn't work. So it's like, yeah, you shouldn't, you are, just as much as like a person like Michael Moore sheds a light on Flint, Michigan, you guys are doing the same thing, except, on a smaller, less mainstream level, but at the same time, still an important level at the same time. So yeah, you shouldn't feel bad about that.
Yeah. So obviously it was only for 1 month, and then they're like, we want all your band receipts. We're like, well, we need them for our business. Well, then you can't do it. We're like, okay.
All right. Quick. Yeah.
But it's like, one of those things where it's like when I'm home, it's like, oh, I have to go grocery shopping and save money. I'm not on tour. I don't have to eat fast food. But it's like, it goes back to the whole thing where it's like when I get home, and like a lot of people don't hear this side of it. Like I'm not like financially set for whatever. Like I'm set for a little bit, but after these tours, we're taking a break and we're going to do a new record. Mm-hmm. And that potentially means that, like 4 months off.
Right.
So for the other guys, like, oh, cool, whatever, I'm making money. For me, it's like, what the hell do I do?
Right.
So like I'm like looking into like trying to get a job at Guitar Center. Like I have like my friends there, and it's like I'm for the first time like I'm actually able to get a real job.
Right.
And it's like, whether or not that's a cool thing or not, like I want to do it for the experience and just feel like a normal person for once,
Yeah.
When I'm home by myself just sitting there, I go crazy.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I can make money and, do whatever. But it's just kind of a shame because it's like all of my traits and my, I guess, skill set, it has to do with the music industry. But it's like, hey, hire a guy from Michigan who tours once in a while and can't, like it's like literally like the worst setup ever. It's like, no, the economy sucks. Why would we hire more people? So it's like, without going to college, I kind of set myself up for like, well, I should have learned how to, draw or like something like that,
Right. Well, I think above all, it's one of those things. Well, actually, this can transition to a question I was going to ask you as well in regards to, because obviously you and your brother play in the band. And so like when your parents, like you said, were supportive in the sense that they, helped you buy instruments and, they wanted to foster that. But obviously like once stuff started to get quote unquote real, where it's like, hey mom, I'm not going to be going to college. I'm going to be touring. Like once you had to kind of, because everybody that plays in a band that starts to tour, approaches that fork in the road where it's like, all right, mom and dad, like this is what I'm going to be doing. And so I imagine, mostly, especially within a family, it's usually one kid that's the quote unquote black sheep in a way where they're like, oh, they're doing some weird stuff I don't understand, but I support it.
Yeah.
But it's funny that both you and your brother were like, yo, we're doing this. Like, how did your parents take that and react to that? Was it one of those things they just kind of took it in stride, or how did it go?
Well, like this is like, I guess the strange, like, I guess the gray area, like black and white, would be like, why the hell would you do that? But like the gray area of it was like in '05 we did a week of Warped Tour. Ernie Ball hooked us up,
Mm-hmm.
and I was still a junior in high school. And that was like over the summer, so worked out, and everyone's like, "Holy crap, you did Warped Tour! You got to eat by a guy from MXPX one day. That's so cool!"
That's incredible.
Yeah, and I was just like, "Hell yeah, man!" And it's just hilarious because it's like we had that, and then Nitro talking to us my senior year of high school. So we already had this like a leg up to my parents, where we're like, "Listen, like we're doing stuff pretty seriously," and they were always big advocates of like Nick learned this like insanely complicated jazz song like years ago, and his reward was a new guitar. And it's like, because my parents obviously had the money to do that, that's a ton of incentive to get better. So like we were always practicing, we're always doing this stuff. So it got to the point where it's like when the incentive has to become a life choice rather than just a gift of sorts, you know what I mean? That's where the college thing came in. And Nick actually went to one, or I think it was a half semester. I don't know if it was a full semester or not, to like our local college in like Flint, like University of Michigan Flint is where he went.
Okay.
And when like we were good friends with a Wilhelm Scream, this is actually kind of full circle with that story. And he gets a call one day, and it's this, Trevor from Wilhelm Scream, and he goes, "Hey dude, our bass player just quit and jumped on a plane and left, and we're going to be in Michigan tomorrow. Would you want to jump on the rest of the tour with us and play bass?" And Nick's like, "What?" And I was just like, "Dude, do it." And he's like, I don't know. So like they called the school and they're like, "Well, you have like a $1,500 drop-off fee. You have all this blah blah blah." And then Wilhelm calls back and goes, "We'll pay it."
Whoa!
So we all
really?
looked at each other. Yeah.
Oh my god!
So we're like, "Holy shit! What do we do?" And Nick like pulled me aside. He's like, "Dude, I mean, this is pretty serious stuff." Like, I know. And then we talked to our parents, and I'm like, "This is going to be the start of something big," And we're like, "Hey, like, is that cool if he drops out?" And they're like, "I mean, they're paying, we're not losing any money over it. Cool, whatever, go for it." And they were supportive, and they like, that was like the first like lever, switched. So we're like, okay,
wow,
that's cool. And then Nick comes back, like, learned everything from like this veteran punk touring band. So by the time it was ready for us to go, like I remember my senior year, I just cared less and less because I was like, I know I'm going on tour. So we had I don't know if you did in school, but we have a thing called a senior exit presentation. And it talks about like, these are my goals. This is the school I'm going to achieve these goals, etc.
Oh wow! No, I didn't have anything like that. I mean, there was maybe something similar to that, but it wasn't like. Did you present it in front of your class or teachers or?
Yeah. It was
Okay.
like a PowerPoint thing.
Oh.
So I guess it was one of those things where it's like, hey, I need to say out loud what I want to do so I actually achieve it and don't look like a dumbass.
Yeah. No, I understand the point.
So,
that's funny.
So I get up in front of my economics class, and I'm the only one who goes, "Well, my career is being a rock and roll musician. It requires no college education, so I will not be going to college." But and I was like, at the time, I was like, right now we're being scouted by a label called Nitro Records, which is owned by the singer of The Offspring. We're going to Japan in a few months, and everyone's just like, their jaws are dropped, and they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
And my teacher like pulled me aside, and he was just like, "Yeah, the vice principal was here during that. I thought that was the coolest thing you did."
Really?
And I was like, "Well, like, what do you mean?" It's like, the fact that you had the balls to say that you're not going to college, but you actually have ambitions and goals to achieve it, and you know what to do.
Right.
Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I was so stoked. I'm like, okay, yeah. So like, I remember like I like took my ACTs just for like shits and giggles, and I just botched it. And I still got a good score on it because I was like, cool, public school system. I don't have to care. I'll still do well.
Right.
And like, that's the fun. I guess the biggest deterrent for my parents was that Nick and I are pretty smart people. Like, I think he had like a 3.8 or something, and I had like a 3.7.
Right.
And it's like, we were never like struggling in school. Like, we were doing fine.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things where it's like, it's cool that we can at least apply our knowledge and stuff to like lyrics and songwriting and all that. And it's just an overall like level-headedness of our band rather than, oh, I'm going to school for blah, 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 even though I don't want to, and I have this thing on the back burner. But then I wonder why the band doesn't work out, Like, that's everyone we know.
Well, yeah,
So.
it's funny that you hit on something in there that I think is really interesting and something I didn't really think of before. But the common, the common conception that obviously like our parents have of playing in a band is there's no shortage of passion with that, but there's no, you don't feel like it's ambitious. Like, I mean, or maybe not that, but they just don't feel, or the ambition isn't attached to responsibility, you know?
Well, and they don't see the payoff. I guess that's the big thing, you know?
Yeah, no, that's true. And so it's like, you know, to be able to, you know, go in front of, you know, your teachers and peers and what have you, and to be able to say that, like, okay, I am not going this traditional route that, you know, people have done for years and years before me, but that doesn't mean I'm some, you know, complete, you know, you're going to find me as a druggy loser in like 3 years at the local bar. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
because that's what people think, where it's just like, okay,
yeah.
well, oh, dude, you want to be in a rock band? Like, pff, sure, whatever. And it's like, because that's,
I think a big part of it too is like Nick and I are both straight edge, so I think that's like a huge help for my parents because they're like, you're not going to go on like crazy drugs and like
yeah,
go after hookers and stuff on tour. You know, it's like you're going to be like, you know, you're level headed and you know what you want rather than just like, yeah, I just want to like play guitar and like do like Guns N' Roses covers at the local bar. You know, it's like
yeah,
night and day compared to that.
yeah, no, no, for sure. And so it's like, yeah, it's funny to be able to like reconcile all that. And like, I just see, because like my wife is a high school English teacher, and I see, like, I mean, similar to your experience in regards to like, once you actually start to do stuff in high school and you start to feel, you know, like you have some sort of voice and a choice in the matter. And then, but then you see, you know, you look around at your fellow classmates and you're just kind of like you're not doing anything. Like they literally are just, you know, dicking around. Like they've got no ambition besides the fact they're just like, oh, well, I know I'm going to go to college. And it's like, well, if you don't really want to do that, there's something else that's out there. And like, you know, you just,
Yeah,
you feel like you just want to open your eyes and be like, oh yeah, there's like, you can explore other opportunities, or you can start trying to figure out how to make money off of your passion in high school now. Like you don't have to wait until you graduate. Like,
yeah, and that's what kills me. Like, and a big thing too is like a lot of, I guess specifically girls, they'll like see like you know their role models or whatever going on tour, like doing merch, tour managing, whatever on like Warped Tour and stuff, and they're like, I'm gonna go to college to learn how to go on tour. And I'm like, you should go on tour to learn how to tour.
right.
You know?
Yeah, totally.
And it's like you're wasting so much money. And like, you know, I have some like close friends now who do that. And it's like, you know, hell yeah, like I'm sure you could move on like way up in the music industry. But I'm like, but if you want to do, you need to do like the grunt work to learn how to do it, you know? Like we played shows for like 3 years to, you know, everyone from nobody to, you know, a few thousand people. And it's like our perspective's, you know, completely changed. And the way we deal with things is completely changed, you know? Everything is based on like timeliness, professionalism, and I mean, I guess now it's, you know, having fun, but like, it's one of those things where if you're going to school for it, you're like the homeschool kid who jumps into like the cool, like, you know, like a school gathering,
Right.
where it's like, you have no social experience. You don't know how things actually work, but you're good at, you know, the bookwork of it.
Right.
And it's totally different.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, like I just kind of like, I'm stoked on how we did it, even though, you know, it is kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like disheartening when like I'll see like my friends like getting married and like they're home, they have these relationships and they get to like, you know, build all this stuff. And I'm like I think it was a year ago, we were home 2 months for the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like this ridiculous thing. And, you know, we're always like, man, I hope someone actually notices we're touring so much, but no one really does. So we're like, well, okay.
Yeah.
And then, you know, well, like I'll see my friends like hang out and then I'll be gone for a year and I'm like, oh, why do things change when I'm gone? I'm like, oh, because I was gone for a fucking year.
Right, right.
Like, that's why.
You're like, these people have lives. Like I have this I've said this on the podcast before, but it's like touring is like a suspended state of animation. Like you're in this otherworldly experience, and you know, I mean, because it's not like when you come home and you talk to people outside of the band that you know you're in a band and like know you travel and stuff. It's not like you can sit there and like really chop it up about that. Like you're like you know you're not going to talk to them about like, dude, we were in Seattle, we got shorted $100 in our guarantee. You're not gonna like, they're not gonna know what you're talking about. So it's like,
and the best part too is like, you know, how much money you make. Like you know, we'll do some bigger tours. I'll leave out the band names.
yeah,
You're getting $100 a night,
right.
and people are like, oh, you each get $100 a night. We're like, no, our band is getting $100 for that. They're
This
like,
is
really?
this is the
Like, what?
collective, yeah. This is the collective payment. This isn't $100 a person.
Yeah. So it's like, when people found out about all that stuff, they thought we were like millionaires. We're like, hell no.
Right,
But
right.
it's like, it's your head is in the right place because you're doing it because you want to do it. You're clearly not doing it for the money.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of how we try and look at it for ourselves. Like that's how we keep our sanity, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think, I mean, yeah, I think it's really important, especially like you said, where the band is at currently, where it's like you guys are essentially, you've decided to sort of flip the proverbial next page in the book of the Swellers to the next chapter where it's like, yo, we're doing it on our own, we're doing it on our own terms, like, we are setting ourselves up for the potential to enjoy this more than we would be if we, decided to be put through another ringer as far as another record label is concerned. And it's like
yeah,
to be
at
able
least for the time being.
right, of course. I mean, yeah, who knows? It's like, in 6 months you guys could be like, oh, well, this opportunity came up, so we can't really say no to that. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah, you're doing your best to obviously marry the idea of like still enjoying the band 10 years later, because that's like, I mean, like I said, that's an achievement in and of itself. And to be able to like you said, set the foundation of like, hey, this is how we set the bar now of what we define success, and this is how we're going to try to achieve that success on our own terms, as opposed to, like you said, all right, we're going to be on the radio, we're going to do all these million of other things, and it's like, well, no, we tried that, and it just didn't work for us.
yeah.
Um,
That's crazy.
yeah, no, for sure. And sort of wrapping things up on I don't even know if I would call this less serious, but the I'm always really attracted to when drummers of a band are able to sort of make their presence felt, because 97% of the time drummers in bands, like, they don't, like, no one knows them. I don't care who
Yeah,
you like. I mean, people know them just because obviously they like the band and they're like, oh yeah, Jonathan, he's a drummer, and but to be able to, like, I guess step, in front of the drum, so to speak, and like like you become an actually, obviously it helps because you do vocals for the band as well, but
yeah,
um,
yeah.
have you like, do you notice that still like existing and happening within music, where it's just like, oh yeah, well, everyone cares about the singer and that's pretty much it?
I guess it depends on the whole demographic. Like
Yeah.
with us, then when we first started, it was always Nick writing everything. And as time progressed, like it's pretty much 50-50 songwriting wise. So I'm definitely one of the main lyricists of our band, and a lot of people don't even know that.
Okay.
And on top of it, it's like I could, as a drummer, I can barely play guitar, but there's like whole songs I've written, and like I'm like writing new songs now. Like I have a bigger part than most drummers would, I guess.
Mhm.
Because normally it's just like, oh, you're the drummer, cool.
Right. Yeah,
But it's like I'm cool with not having to be like playing a song and be like, all right, guys, I wrote that one. I'm back here. Remember me? All right, here we go. Here's the next song. It's like,
right.
Okay. Like I love it. Like I love finding bands when I find out that it's someone else who writes the songs.
Mhm.
It's not just the singer.
Yeah.
So it gives it a whole different perspective. But it's like the way I look at it, I'm the dude who grew up wanting to be the actor and the singer and yada yada yada, and I ended up being the writer. And I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. Like I have my stamp on things I want to do, because if I don't have like a creative part, I go insane. But I guess kind of like a big influence for the whole like coming out of the woodwork would be like Riley from Thrice.
Oh yeah.
He's always been a dude that's like he's like the spokesperson for Thrice,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. Like he was actually one of the first guests on this podcast, and um, I've known him for years, and like watching him, I think the thing that gets me stoked more so than like, oh, a drummer making, a voice for themselves, is like when you actually see a band member step into a role that not only is important for themselves because you've watched them develop, but obviously it's also important for the band, where it's like, it creates more of an identity. It gets people invested more in the band because it's not just, the centerpiece, aka the singer, where it's like, oh yeah, like I know everything about the singer. I know that, he wears size 10 shoes, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, to be able to like watch a person develop and like, okay, like I'm obviously just as important as everybody else in the band. And this is something I feel comfortable with because I think obviously a lot of people, and people fill certain roles within the band just as much as, people fill a role in society. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool that obviously like you saw, what Riley did and then, you felt obliged to be like, oh yeah, I can do that. Like this exists. Like this isn't weird
Yeah, yeah.
if I make myself
Because the way
visible.
I look at it, it's like, a lot of people could just sit around and do nothing. Like, I mean, we have guys in our band who, like, they have their jobs and they do whatever. But with me, it's like, I don't do anything. Like, the band is what I do,
Yeah.
So I'm always, like, online, like, checking all the sites and, like, literally doing everything I can to, like, just brand ourselves, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like, I could turn laziness into productivity, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I think, and sort of putting the final point on our chat, I think it's, I mean, you're invested, and it's like I think it's just hearing the way that you talk about things, it shows that it's like this obviously the Swellers ends in 6 months, 3 years, no one ever knows, but once it does come to a conclusion, it's like you're still going to be involved in some way, shape, or form. Like, and that,
Yeah, exactly.
and to me, that's like the most important thing that people can kind of carry on, no matter what they're doing. It's like as long as they're able to still be creative in some way, shape, or form, and still be invested, and not like fall victim to becoming jaded or lazy or whatever. It's like that's all anybody can really hope for, especially being plagued with the curse of being in independent music.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I won't take up any more of your time, but thank you so much, dude. I really appreciate this, and I hope you had fun in some way, shape, or form on.
Oh, no, it's nice actually being able to talk instead of being able to give off just rattled bullshit responses.
Right, totally. Just be like, here's Jonathan. Here's a question. All right, here's another one. It's like, that's it
Dude,
gets.
that's my thing. Like, I'm kind of hoping like people can hear our stories this way rather than, oh, here's what our band name means. Oh, here's my favorite color.
And there you have it, everybody. Thank you for joining us again on another exciting episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at 100 Words Podcast, and go to the website 100wordspodcast.com, and also visit our great partner in propertyofzach.com. And until next week, be safe. See you later.